Alrighty. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Leona, and on behalf of everyone here at Better Read Than Dead, we are so excited to see you on Zoom tonight to celebrate Kai Wilde's inspiring book, The 99th Koala, Rescue and Resilience on Kangaroo Island. Please note that tonight's event is recorded, so if you would not like to be filmed, please turn off your camera settings. Before we begin the proceedings, I would like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet. These will be different depending on where you're zooming in from. For me, it is the land of the people of the Eora Nation. It is upon their ancestral lands that Better Read Than Dead is built. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Now, to introduce tonight's guests. In last summer's devastating fires, Kangaroo Island lost half of its koala population, with many more left injured and starving. When Kailas Wilde, a trade and conservationist at heart, heard that there were injured koalas on Kangaroo Island who could only be reached by a tree climber, he drove 1,500 kilometres to volunteer. 7 weeks later, he had crowdfunded $65,000, rescued more than 100 koalas, and had formed a special bond with a baby koala, Kai. His social media posts gained tens of thousands of views and press attention around Australia and overseas. The 99th Koala shares that experience in words and pictures and introduces us to some of the koalas of Kangaroo Island. Sometimes tragic, sometimes hopeful, Kai's story above all commemorates our unique wildlife, of one person trying to make a difference. Tonight, Kai will be in conversation with Gregg Borschmann. Gregg is one of Australia's most experienced journalists and oral historians specialising on the environment. Having started his career in print at the Age newspaper in Melbourne in 1974, Gregg then spent the decade in the 80s reporting Australia from the back blocks for the Age, the Sydney Morning Herald, the Courier Mail, and various specialist magazines. During the Hawke Labor governments of the late 1980s and 90s, he worked as a media advisor to former Environment and Social Security Minister Senator Graham Richardson. Since the early 1990s, Gregg has recorded 3 major oral National Library of Australia on Australia's forests, environmental public policy, and the history of the Great Barrier Reef. He's currently recording a 4th collection for the NLA on the koala and writing a book about koalas. Gregg left ABC Radio National in August of this year after 2 years as a producer and reporter and a senior producer on RN Breakfast with Fran Kelly and Hamish McDonald. He continues his work as a consultant oral historian for the National Library of Australia. We're so delighted to be able to host 2 such dynamic speakers tonight. Before we get started, one last note that there will be a Q&A session and you can type any questions you may have for Kai and Gregg into the group chat and they'll answer them via video once the time comes. Without further ado, I'll pass it over to Gregg and Kai.
G'day, Leona. G'day, Kai, and hello everyone out there in Zoom land. And Kai, we better be good because she seriously pumped up our tyres.
I reckon. if I've got beads of sweat, it's because of this lamp that's shining on my
head. Kai, look, thank you. Normally, a picture book you spend 5 minutes with and that's it. This book has got fantastic photos, like some truly amazing images from a remarkable moment in time. But you tell the story so well. You tell a story. You've written it well and you've got a story to tell. So I want to start at the back end of that story. What I want to know is, where are you now? How did you possibly recover? How have you recovered physically and emotionally from that experience? Because it did extract a price. It put you under extreme stress and pressure relentlessly for weeks. How did you get through that? How did you finish up where you are now?
I mean, yeah, in some ways I'm still recovering from that. Yeah, whole time I've still got a buggered shoulder, and I've noticed, I don't handle stress too well. And I'm still trying to get to a point where I can kind of, have a greater capacity. But yeah, I think, I ended up finding myself being able to get through that entire time by just kind of, acknowledging that it was just a really quite a traumatic, distressing situation, and that I should actually seek help. and talk to professionals and seek that support. And the other thing was, like, as distressing as it was, I actually found, prior to Kangaroo Island, when half of the country was on fire, and that incredible lack of leadership that we had, I found that probably the most kind of distressing and I wouldn't say traumatic, but yeah, that was it was almost like a bit of a relief to be able to help on KI.
Okay, we'll go to KI, but I want to go to a bit of the backstory now, but also I want a sense from you, because you hint early on in the book that you were an arborist. You hadn't had a whole lot to do with wildlife. And I guess the interesting thing for me was this intense experience gave you a window into a parallel reality, a parallel world, that sort of world of a native animal that most of us never get. I just wonder how it changed the way you now look at the world.
I mean, it's interesting because 10 years ago, I feel like I had this exact same lesson, when I started volunteering, to rehabilitate koalas north of Brizzy, and found that we're taking on these koalas that had been hit by cars or attacked by dogs, or had chlamydia, rehabilitating them, and then just sending them out into where they came from, and the situations that caused them to need care. And yeah, I guess that was like this really pivotal moment for me that informed, actually up until this point right now, where it's really driven me to want to advocate for the conservation of habitat and also for climate action. And it just I felt like I was back there, actually being on Kangaroo Island, just going, all these people are like getting behind me and so concerned for the welfare of these animals, and want them to be okay. But we're still not kind of seeing outside of that wildlife rehabilitation and rescue kind of lens into the bigger picture of habitat conservation and doing something about our climate, basically.
Yeah, and I guess a world where we don't have to be constantly making triage decisions. Which one are we going to save today?
Yeah. Excuse me. This lamp. I mean, yeah, it's really to for us to focus on some preventative measures, that mean we don't have to triage in the first place.
Yeah. Sorry, Kai. Sorry.
Why? What? No, it's this lamp, I tell you.
I thought I was upsetting you. I thought you'd gone into an emotion.
No, this for some reason this lamp is just like really hot, but it's so.
Well, turn it down, man.
I might turn it. I might move it. Hang on. Hopefully that helps.
You can tell we didn't do too much of a rehearsal for this. Kai, look, let's go to the backstory. Who are you? How did you grow up? And how did you come to know nature?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in nature. So we grew up in northern New South Wales on 12 acres of bushland. We'd come across wildlife that needed to be rescued and rehabilitated. We'd have snakes in the lounge room, snakes in the kitchen drawer. All these kinds of little experiences. Mum was an environmentalist, so that really exposed me to, I guess, that way of thinking and seeing the world as well. But certainly, there was, I guess, late teens, early adulthood, I kind of, perhaps maybe not drifted away, but that wasn't part of my world. Like, yeah, and just around mid-20s, I guess, like, life happened, and it just felt like there needed to be more to life than just, you know, earning money and consuming things. And yeah, and it kind of just found that real meaning in conservation, I guess. And yeah.
The trigger for you going to Kangaroo Island was obviously the fires. You saw that sort of disaster roll out on the East Coast, and in a funny sort of way, you know, you mentioned the lack of leadership, the lack of political leadership, but you also obviously felt a little helpless in terms of what you could do.
Yeah, I mean, so I've volunteered with the SES for about 4 years, but yeah, and I just, you know, as much as I could, I helped out with the SES from Sydney, whether it was just within my suburb and my local unit, or yeah, just kept putting my name down for out of area deployments. But yeah, I felt I really wished that I could have, like, that I joined the RFS instead of the SES, so I could have just been helping out on a truck basically. And yeah, there was always that feeling that could be doing more, and wish I could be doing more. Yeah.
You made the decision, you made a few phone calls, you made the decision that you were going to go to Kangaroo Island. And the thing that struck me was that this was weeks after the firestorm. So give me a sense of when you arrived, why there was still so much more to do. Because really, you know, I was reporting that at the time, and we were crossing the Kangaroo Island in the you know, the eye of the crisis. But you know, 2 weeks after the event, you know, the caravan had moved on. But that's precisely the moment when you arrived.
Yeah, I mean, it was a real shock. I think for me to find and to see, and you know, these koalas that were still in trees and that hadn't been considered almost. And I don't know, I guess it seemed like a bit of a blind spot almost, but I think this was the situation that, you know, so much of the country was in. You know, everyone had been just completely overwhelmed by these unprecedented, you know, bushfire disaster. And Kangaroo Island is such a unique situation, you know, where there's tens of thousands of koalas, you know, and just that, you know, 2/3 of the island being destroyed. So I can kind of appreciate that something like there's koalas burnt in trees, like, yeah, that can only be reached by a tree climber, you know. Yeah, I can see how that could perhaps fall through the cracks. Or
paint me a picture of the island, because, you know, we know that the western part of the island has got some really important nature conservation values, but, you know, there's agriculture there. There's quite extensive grazing and farming, and there's also a lot of blue gum plantations, which ironically is where you found a lot of the koalas. Just give me a sense of the lay of the land. What? Because you'd never been to Kangaroo Island before. You know, what was your sense of it when you arrived?
I mean, I'd been to Kangaroo Island once before, and for like a night at Kingscote, and yeah, but so basically didn't know the island. But yeah, I mean, you get to Penny Shore, it's where the ferry arrives, and you wouldn't be able to tell that anything could happen basically. And yeah, driving for about 15 minutes or so, then you start to kind of see signs of the fires and, you know, blackened fields. By the time I arrived, you know, yeah, so much cleaning up had already happened. You know, all the livestock had been kind of dealt with, I guess. And then, yeah, as you kind of drive towards Pandana, where the wildlife park is in the center of the island, like, yeah, it kind of, it's like a combination of fire affected and intact landscape. And then, yeah, once you kind of pass Pandana and head west, and it just, yeah, everything kind of changes, and it's just this completely obliterated landscape, basically. Yeah.
Was it the national park or the plantations that you first turned your immediate focus to? Like, where were the koalas?
Yeah, I mean, so the entire time, it was just in plantations, and
Wow.
yeah, the national parks was just off limits, and
Is that because there weren't koalas there?
Not necessarily, no.
Parks just shut down their estate.
That was, I mean, it was just completely off limits to me, and you know, there was enough to, yeah, to kind of go on with, or to be completely occupied by, for that not even to enter my mind, basically. Yeah.
And were those plantations, were they like big sort of corporate blocks, or was it farm forestry? Like, did every farmer have 10 hectares or 100 hectares? Were they all joined up into great big blocks, or give me a sense of how there was a connectedness, if there was?
Yeah, I mean, they were just, I don't know, I think it was a combination of both. Yes. That would be my understanding.
And the other thing that intrigues me, like doing the koala research that I am for the book that I'm writing, one of the constant criticisms is that forestry is knocking out the big old habitat trees, which koalas produce. And yet you were finding koalas in saplings that, you know, some of them would have been dangerous to climb.
Yeah, I mean, I find this is interesting for me too, because this is what I would argue is a solution to native forest logging as well, that we need to switch to plantations. Like, well, we do need to do that. I guess we need to also manage it in a way that doesn't create this entirely new problem. But certainly, I mean, that I don't know what the solution is on Kangaroo Island now as well. And because it's an island, you know, and they've got all these plantations, or all this timber and this product, you know, there's also this question of how do they get it off the island? So I think, yeah, we really do need to think about what we're doing.
So as an arborist, you saw these plantations, and what was your first thought? Oh my God, this is going to be dangerous? Like, you started to think mechanically, how am I going to get up there? How am I going to sort of access these trees?
I mean, my first thought was these trees are, you know, single stemmed, quite simple and straightforward to climb as far as trees go. And then just, you know, making that assessment of, you know, how fire affected they were, and the fact that they were on the edges of plantations, and where the koalas had either remained and happened to survive or been attracted to was, you know, the remaining kind of unburnt, or the most unburnt. You know, I describe them as slithers because they were just like, you know, one row of trees basically on the edge. But yeah, you could kind of, you know, compared to the deeper you went into the plantation, kind of the more destroyed and fire affected they became, and the more hazardous, unstable. So yeah, I was just making all those assessments basically.
Were you literally stepping over burnt koalas, dead koalas, skeletons?
Yeah, absolutely. Like every day, just walking, amongst these koalas that had just been burnt beyond recognition, essentially. And and just kind of wondering how, I mean, you wonder how they got to where you're finding them, or just it's mind-boggling, really. Yeah.
You obviously, this is new territory for you. You'd never had to catch a koala before. You'd been involved in Brisbane, as you said, with some care, but you know, this was new territory for you, and you created a series of rules. Some of them related to the trees and the assessments that you had to do, but also some of them related to the animals. So let's go through the tree rules and the koala rules.
All right. I mean, the first rule would just be, assessing the tree and ensuring its structural integrity. And, you'd find sometimes we'd be climbing trees like that were right next to trees that had failed at the root plate, or, snapped in half. And probably some of the most heart-wrenching times were actually like when Freya was up the tops of these trees and I was on the ground, and it was, where the winds were picking up. And so okay, what other that was, an essential.
Inspecting the trees. Because we all think that eucalypts are these massive rooted things that don't fall over, but clearly you're in that territory.
Yeah, I mean, there's this, I guess, this misconception that, trees have these really deep roots that anchor deep into the ground, but, it's really the top 30 centimeters of soil that, you've got the root plate. So once that's affected by fire.
I loved your rule for the animals. The first rule was avoid being bitten.
Well, that's the critical rule. Definitely. And fortunately, I think, if you got a decent bite by, one of the larger koalas, they were getting up to 15 kilos there. I think it would see you needing stitches and pretty much put you out of action.
So, we imagine this koala as sort of a fairly cute and cuddly creature, but it really does have some weapons, like quite apart from the teeth. The claws are really quite extraordinary. So you had to deal with both.
Yeah, I mean, and, on one hand, like, you still do have that experience of them being cute and cuddly as well. And, but certainly, you don't see that side of them. But once you are interacting with them in this way, and they don't want to be handled, they think they're being predated upon. And they can support themselves, with one arm hanging off a tree. They're just basically balls of muscle with claws and teeth, as far as I'm concerned.
I love that, balls of muscle with claws and teeth. Were you given advice not to anthropomorphize them?
No, because
I've given names, weren't they? Once they hit sort of the rehab stations, they were actually given names. They were treated as individuals.
Yeah, I mean, actually, up until Joey Kai, I didn't even realize that. Like, I just thought they were given numbers. And that's actually when I realized they were giving names, and I thought, I would have probably given a few more of them names. Like, I do think that allows people to connect with them in a way that's important and and meaningful.
To everyone out there, I'll just remind you, and Leona might want to do a bit of a shout out, but if you do have a question that you'd like me to put to Kai, just go into the chat room and type away and we'll pick it up. Kai, how could we not talk about Joey Kai? You found a tree with 3 koalas, 2 of them seemed to be okay, and there was this one small little very burnt bundle, a little Joey, your first orphaned and seriously injured koala. Talk me through what happened.
I mean, this was out done like in a plantation on the south coast of the island, so it was actually out of phone reception. I was by myself, and I guess just as soon as I saw it, I just felt this real urgency to get it down. And at that point, we'd seen koalas that had experienced kind of permanent organ damage. And yeah, so just by the looks of it, it really looked like I'd be getting it back to the hospital just to, you know, prevent or further suffering or put her out of her misery, essentially. And yeah, just the whole process of getting her out of the tree and catching her, you know, was, yeah, it's pretty stressful or very stressful as well. You know, just being concerned about even forcing her to fall out of the tree, or just this idea that, you know, pushing or stressing out an already kind of exhausted and stressed and animal. Yeah, that was just all extremely stressful, basically. And
talk me through the rescue. 3 koalas in a tree, that's a big deal.
I mean, yeah, look, I just focused on her and the other 2 were further up the tree, so it didn't come into it, which is good. Yeah, from what I could see, for that point anyway, you know, because I'd come back and check them like once every 2 to 3 days. Yeah, so it was just, you know, getting up to the tree to, you know, most, like when I would find joeys, they'd be out on these lateral branches on the ends, like amongst leaves. And so, yeah, that would allow you to climb up to where that lateral branch met the stem or the main trunk of the tree. And so once you were there, you could just flag them down, basically, and they'd back down to you. And then
you better explain the process of flagging for people.
Sure, yeah. So you've just got a like a telescopic pole. So it might be about 6 meters long once it's extended, and, you know, it's either got a flag or, you know, my preference would be a plastic bag, something that's kind of noisy. Yeah, so you basically just waving that in their face, and it causes them to want to move away from it.
Preferably down.
Yeah, preferably, and towards you. Yeah. And so.
But Kai behaved differently. Her first reaction was just to curl into a ball amongst all that dead foliage.
Yeah. Well, not for long. Yeah, she did respond, and yeah, it was relatively straightforward in the end, considering I was by myself. Yeah.
You had this sense of urgency. You knew you had to get her back to hospital. Talk us through what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I just got her down and got her back to the hospital as fast as I, you know, safely could. Yeah, and the vets inspected her, and yeah, besides, you know, finding a big tick on her face, actually, yeah, that, you know, just found that she'd be, you know, they thought that she would actually make it through, that she wasn't too far gone. So yeah, I think, yeah, I was definitely in a very heightened state of kind of emotion at that point. And yeah, it was just as kind of distressing as it had been, it was like equally just such a massive relief to find out, yeah, that, you know, they wouldn't have to euthanize her, basically.
I never thought of ticks and native animals, but of course, you know, the things that they have to cope with.
Yeah, and you know, I think I need to check this out, but I think, you know, they've got like a double nail, perhaps either on their feet or their hands, that would basically, you could see it'd be ideal for moving ticks.
Wow.
But I need to check that out.
I wonder if that's an evolutionary adaptation. I tell you, I was in the southeast forests last week, and I got 3 ticks one day, and I'm still suffering.
Oh, yeah. I'm starting to itch now.
You then went back fairly regularly, and you know, that was when you twigged that the koalas were starting to get names, wasn't it? Wasn't that the moment?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was the moment, but at the same time, yeah, there was just, for me anyway, there was too many koalas to worry about naming or even worry about kind of forming a connection with or anything. I mean, it was really, there was the kind of the two koalas. There was Joey Kai, and then there was Oliver, who like I did allow myself to kind of get connected to, and that was no good because he didn't make it, and
do you want to talk us through why?
I mean, I probably don't have a good enough understanding to really explain it properly right now.
Did he get cooked? Because, koalas are surpringly, their internal organs, they get heat stripped very easily. In the last couple of summers, before this one coming up, the Pilliga koalas have been really badly hit by, weeks on end of high daytime temperatures, high evening temperatures. Like it literally can just cook them.
Wow. I had no idea about that.
So Joey Kai, where did she end up?
I mean, she's ended up, being fully rehabilitated by Sam and Dana at the wildlife park, and the hospital that is attached to that now, and she's been released. Thank goodness.
Are they tracking her? Has she got a radio collar on her?
No, she's been chipped, but not tagged or collared or anything.
And of all those koalas, like, releasing koalas back into the wild there is, I mean, where were the trees that weren't burnt? Where was the habitat?
Yeah, I mean, so in this case, Sam and Dana have actually, been able to buy land that that wasn't burnt, that's adjoining the wildlife park there. But certainly, that is that's a really good question. And such a great percentage of the koala population, which, was arguably there was an overpopulation. But even with that reduction in the population now due to the fires, there's still been that massive reduction in habitat. So it's a very interesting situation on that island.
Talk us through the logistics that were there, the support groups and networks and people that you were dealing with, because, there was a bit going on, there was a lot of focus.
Yep. So, on the one hand, the Koala Hospital was just, extremely well run and organized and funded. And, you had zoos kind of sending staff, from Victoria and South Australia and Queensland. I guess, the other side of that, it really felt like that, the search and rescue component, or that side, was quite the opposite, quite under-resourced and really left to locals. That's what. Certainly.
Max Smith asks the relevant question: Where were you by yourself for most of the rescues, or was the Kai rescue out of the ordinary? By yourself at the time. You did occasionally work by yourself, but you also worked with others. Again, talk through how that happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think at that point, that was earlier on, and when I would help the hospital cut leaf in the mornings, and then I would just go out by myself in the afternoon. And if I came across a koala that I felt it was essential to have a second person assisting on the ground, then it was either get on the phone, and if I was in range, or get to a point where I could get in range, and then sometimes it'd be an hour until they could get there. And yeah, it was just incredibly inefficient to work like that, basically. And yeah, when you kind of had this constant sense of urgency as well. Yeah, so there was a few situations like that, but yeah, like I soon kind of identified that basically we really needed a second person who was capable of climbing as well. Yeah.
And this is Freya.
So got Freya over. Yeah.
She was a Kiwi. So what convinced her she needed to be on Kangaroo Island?
Well, she's an Aussie, so she's just living in New Zealand, and just we go back a bit and have done a bunch of climbing together, and she was just, I think, wanted to help me out, really. Yeah, probably felt sorry for me.
Kai, you mentioned, and this is kind of interesting because koalas are now, you mentioned the help from the various zoos and their staff around Australia, but koalas are now in zoos around the world, and it's not just a matter of going and mixing them up some Uncle Toby's. They've got a limited preference of some key species that they like to eat. What was happening with that collection of browse? Browse is obviously their fresh tucker. What were you cutting and where were you going to do that? And how much did you have to collect? Because if you had a hospital full of koalas, you're coming home with a ute full of leaves, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, that was someone's role, basically, like Cam or someone else from the Australia Zoo Wildlife Hospital, that their role was to cut leaf every single day, and it would be at least a ute load. And yeah, just kind of really fortunately, a plantation happened to have burnt, 1 or 2 years earlier. And so it just meant that there was just this perfect amount of regrowth on all those trees. So it was, kind of
and quite low down. You didn't have to get a cherry picker to get at it.
Precisely, yeah. It was all just epicomic growth at the base of the tree, basically at cutting height, at shoulder height. It's like a supermarket, like a garden.
Thank good for blue gum, Eucalyptus globulus.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's one of the most. Is it the most exported tree in the world?
They love it in South America. It is one of the most widely grown Australian eucalypts, and it's grown because it's quick growing and it produces a white pulp, which they love for the pulp mills.
Yeah.
So, what I'd like to know is, when did you know that the job was done?
Yeah, this is interesting because something that added to the sense of urgency for quite a lot of the time was this idea that the epicomic growth after the fires had a toxicity that was too high for the koalas. And
that's the story I've heard. Absolutely. My ears pricked up when I read that in your book.
Yeah, I mean, and this is what I'd been told, and I had no reason to kind of know anything different. And so, yeah, there was kind of this idea that, even though we're starting to see regrowth, doesn't mean the koalas are going to be able to eat it and survive. And then, we kind of, I saw a koala eating it and spoke to Stuart from Australia Zoo, and he spoke to a koala specialist who said, look, if they're eating it, then it's okay. And in fact, since the bushfires, there's actually been a study that has shown this regrowth to be acceptable. So that's really interesting. But yeah, at the time, that was a really pivotal moment, basically, where, instead of every koala we were seeing, just thinking, okay, that's koala that's about to starve. We could say, like, if that koala hasn't got significant burns or has, no other reason to be interfered with, then like it's, so far away from regrowth that should be edible for it. So that, that was a real kind of shift in direction for us. And then, that just meant, we would just try and cover as much ground as possible, and just try and identify those koalas that we could see had, been burnt or, were significantly emaciated. Yeah.
Kai, what have you done in terms of staying in touch? Either following up, someone like Joey Kai, or just staying in touch with the people and the networks that you plugged into then?
Yeah, I mean, I think those people that I worked really closely with, so like we've just got this, we share this bond almost, I think, forever now. So I mean, I stay in touch with those people like Sam and Dana and Bree, who was a ADF volunteer, and and the vets, Flick, and those people. So we all stay in touch, and I guess that's just something that we'll share as a bond.
Anna has asked a very cheeky question here. She wants to know if you're single.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yes is the short answer. But anyway.
Okay, well, all right. Well, I'll let you
now
guys
I'm sorry.
Change of email addresses later. And then she says, no, she actually had a little smiley face emoji. So I don't know whether she was serious or not. Anyway, no, my question is, having gone through this experience, and if Kai knew back then what he knows now and feels now, would he have volunteered? Would you do it all over again? That's an interesting question.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, probably there's just like that question of the epicomic growth, right? And that being edible. So I would certainly have a different approach with that knowledge. But I mean, I went down there thinking I might help one or two koalas. So yeah.
And what about sort of looking forward? Scott again asked the relevant question. We're now beginning of another summer. Thank goodness it's a bit wetter and not quite as things aren't quite as dry. Absolutely. Where are we at? What plans are in place? How can people, organise to be of help? Not just saving koalas, but koalas and other wildlife. Many of us would like to offer specific skills. We might have to work together on this. Where are the networks? How do we plug in?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question, because that's something I found, when I was on KI and saying like, "Whoa, there's this situation here," and there's so many people that were reaching out wanting to help, and we saw that too when, for example, the RSPCA asked for 100 volunteers and got 10,000 applications, and so really, like, it's so clear that, and this was my experience too, that to be able to help when shit hits the fan, you have to have kind of started preparing for that, perhaps years in advance, and started establishing those trusting working relationships and those networks. So, and sometimes even if you can't see how what you're being involved with is going to apply in a certain situation, like you might be meeting a certain person or developing a certain skill that can be useful. So yeah, I think whatever's around you in your local community, like try and plug into that, whether it's wildlife or whether it's the state emergency services or the RFS. I think all of those things yeah, will add to, you know, a more efficient kind of response when it's needed.
We talked just off air before we went online about what you called the fetishization of you know, caring and wildlife rescue. What are your thoughts there? Because you've seen it up close and personal, as you said. You know, everyone wants to be helpful, but you know, what is the danger of that sort of very narrow focus? You know, fetish is quite I think a good word in a sense, because it's almost like it tugs at our heartstrings, but you know, we don't look much beyond the picket fence.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe that's, yeah, fetishization or glorification, like, I guess those two things, but
heartstrings, it tugs at our heartstrings. And I guess this goes
to
that climate sort of hint that you gave us right at the beginning when you were a kid, and thinking about conservation now. It comes down to some pretty tough choices. It's not just about saving a koala on Kangaroo Island, it's about saving landscapes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I feel like that's the task. I feel like that should be kind of a responsibility and a task of anyone who kind of works in wildlife rescue and rehabilitation, is to take people on that journey and create that and ensure that there's that understanding. That to actually really truly kind of rescue any wildlife at all, like it's conserving the habitat that's essential. Yeah, and you know, what we saw over the summer was habitat that had been conserved and protected that, you know, just got completely wiped out by bushfire in a matter of days or weeks. So yeah, we've really got to focus on both of those, not just conserving habitat, but again, it's just that it's climate change, you know.
You're getting some shout outs here. Safari said that the Inner Westies, the wildlife rescue Inner Westies, are very grateful, so very grateful for your tree climbing work with our possums too. Huge congrats.
Oh, well, yeah, this is, I think years of volunteering for WISE to help wildlife carers put possums back up into trees. It's just, you're handling a life in a tree basically, and you've got to be really careful. And I think that really helped on KI.
The possums are sort of got one up on the koalas though, because they have learnt very well to sort of live in those peri-urban areas where, you know, they can sort of get on with and even sort of benefit in some weird ways and at times from human sort of habitation, but not the koala.
No, I guess, you know, that's probably largely down to their diet too. Like,
well, also dogs, cars, everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Possums just maybe a bit quicker. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe it's, you know, the getting along the power lines as well, perhaps. Like small things that, yeah.
Kai, look, I'm just wondering, out of this incredibly intense experience, what's the legacy for you? You know, it clearly touched you personally. You know, you're still dealing with a bunged shoulder, but that's physical. That'll sort itself out, hopefully. But, you know, this experience has changed your life. You know, where does it leave you now?
I wish I knew. Things are... No, you're right. It's been a strange time, kind of like coming back from KI into this pandemic, and it is like it is a funny time. But you know, the things I kind of do know is that I guess it feels like I've amassed like a great deal of goodwill and support and people that the support of people who really, really care about the conservation of wildlife, and I really want to be able to use that and to advocate for, you know, the conservation of habitat basically, and climate action for sure. Yeah, that's and yeah, just also just really applying all of those lessons from the summer and from Kangaroo Island in terms of being prepared and working with other organisations and collaboratively.
I've got to say, there was a question here from Sue who said, look, how did all those agencies, those different networks that were involved, you know, the Humane Society, SAVEM, South Australian Voluntary Emergency Management, the Wildlife Park, was that coordinated by the time you got there? Did it become more coordinated? Because you said there was a bit of a gap where you were operating in terms of rescue. Seemed to be sort of
like, yeah, I mean, I guess it did all work. it was coordinated. I didn't see how, I didn't have visibility of how that was coordinated. Yeah.
Kai, I've got to say, one of the things I would urge people to do is, and as I said right at the start, you've written a really remarkable story well. And for me, it's one of those unusual picture books that does have a quite incredible and well-told story to tell. But I'm looking now at some of the photographs, and they are just stunning. How did you bring that collection together?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just luck, really, that, you know, two incredible photographers came out with me. Myself for a day, and then, you know, Freya and I, and yeah, we're just able to.
They were news photographers.
Yeah, so so Daniel from the New York Times came out, and David, who was down with the Smithsonian magazine. So yeah, that was incredibly fortunate that happened. Otherwise, it would have just been, you know, my selfies and yeah, not quite the same.
No, I've seen a lot of nature photography over the years, but this is some of the best nature photography that I've seen. Truly remarkable.
Oh, wow.
Because you've got nature, but you've also got this other element of sort of drama and rescue and animals. I've got to say also, Kai, I'm looking at a photograph here on page 206, and you look about 150 years older than you do now.
I got to find it.
So it's the double spread after page 204. You've got your green helmet on. As I said, you look like you're about 150.
204. Where is it?
It's the second last page of the book.
Oh, that one?
Yeah.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Oh, really? I mean, probably feel like it. I was ragged. Oh my God, mate. Yeah. Yeah, no, I thought, there's definitely worse photos of me than that. Jeez. Don't worry. They don't go in the book. Yeah.
So you mentioned sort of getting, I don't know if it was counselling, but professional help since.
Counselling.
What did you learn from that?
I mean, you know, more than anything, like, I actually learned how good it was that I already had a counsellor before everything turned to shit, or that I really needed counselling, because, you know, I had this person that had an idea of who I was and had established some kind of baseline. So I think, and trust as well. So that's one really good thing. I guess that was, again, like that prepare for things you can't really even see now. So that was a good one. And
how did you realise that you were off the reservation and needed help?
That would be the the crying when I was eating my breakfast in the morning, or even just getting a supportive message from a mate, and that would be it. That would just trigger me, like turn me into a kind of crying mess. So
you're a strong man, you're a fit man. Do you feel, in a funny sort of way though, that experience going to the edge and sort of tipping over has built another level of awareness or resilience in you?
I think I want to say yes, but I guess just that experience of really pushing myself to this edge, and kind of being able to still achieve what I set out to achieve, I guess, has given me like a bit of a new kind of, I think I'm able to trust my judgment in a different kind of way, if that makes it's hard to explain.
Because you were following your gut. When you drove over there were moments, there was a key moment in the Western Plains of New South Wales where you seriously considered turning around. You stopped for 12 hours.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So it was a 3-hour stop. I just, had realized, I actually have no idea what's going on this island. And I didn't want to just drive for another 10 hours and with all these doubts in my head about what I was doing. So it was, Go.
What next, Kai? What next?
It's like, let's just get through this book.
Sell
this
a
book
million
promo.
copies.
Hey, oh yeah, okay. And then really it's, I guess, like, it's since I got back, it's just been, let's like focus on what's happening in my own state of New South Wales, and the fact that we're looking at the extinction of koalas in New South Wales before 2050, at the rate that we're going. So that's kind of what's been next since I got back, kind of.
Thank you for that. That's a nice little segue to this message from Scott, who says that tomorrow, 12 noon, Tuesday, at Martin Place, the top of Martin Place, Sydney, so that presumably is up at the Parliament House end, a vigil for koalas. And they're doing that every Tuesday in November, which is kind of a nice thing to do, a remembrance sort of Tuesday for 4 Tuesdays in a row. So thank you, Scott, and I hope that there's lots of people there with you.
Well, yeah, and in fact, tomorrow's the last day that the New South Wales government can decide whether to approve the the koala bill. So that's going to be happening tomorrow, actually.
They ain't out of the woods. They ain't out of the woods. Kai, a quite remarkable story, a remarkable book. I dipped me lid to you. I know how hard it is to get words on paper, so I salute you. A job well done. Thanks to Ben Ball. A big shout out to Ben at Simon Fisker. He's one of the great publishers of natural history books in Australia, and he's done a good one with this. So I know that's a spruik, folks, but I'm telling you, it's money well spent. It's a beautiful book to look at. It's a fantastic read. Leona, over to you.
Alrighty. Well, yeah. I mean, as we all now know, it's such a beautiful, amazing book. It's a really important read. You're not going to regret it. Come to your local independent bookstore if you would like to support koalas, Kai, and us. And thank you so much, everyone, for coming along today. It's been a really, really gorgeous conversation.
Yeah, I'd like to acknowledge Kai for being so honest about sort of just how this whole experience impacted him. I really do respect you for that insight on it, Kai.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, it's not always easy to talk about actually still. So, but yeah, it's important, eh? Yeah.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And I'll sign off. Leona, you can do the final farewells. And thanks again, Kai.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks so much,
everyone.
everyone. Bye.